Hello, everyone. Welcome to Kurve Therapeutics webinar, Fighting Back Against Alzheimer's. I'm Mark Giroux, the founder and CEO of Kurve Therapeutics. Joining me today is Scott Pantel, founder and CEO of Life Science Intelligence, and Glenn Cornett, MD, PhD, and Kurve's Chief Science Officer. So welcome, gentlemen.
Hello.
Mark.
Today, we're going to talk about the current state of Alzheimer's treatments, and we're also going to talk about how Kurve is affecting that, what we can do for you today and in the future. So we're really excited to bring this to you. We're glad to have Scott here with his tremendous knowledge of the industry, and Glenn with his MD, PhD is going to be able to shed a lot of light on what it is that we're tackling here today. So Glenn, why don't you take over and introduce yourself?
Yes, hello. I'm the Chief Science Officer at Kurve Therapeutics. I've been working on CNS drugs for quite a while, and I'm thrilled to be working with Mark at Kurve, where we have a number of promising trials that are moving forward into a phase 3 in Alzheimer's and perhaps elsewhere.
All right, great. Now, I guess I'll introduce myself as well. It's a pleasure to be with you, gentlemen, today. Thanks for having me. My name is Scott Pantel, and I'm CEO of LSI. We are a medtech focused market research advisory firm. We work with venture funded startups all the way up to the biggest medical device companies in the world who have an appetite for M&A and new technologies. And we also work with investors who invest along the way. Absolutely love what it is that Kurve Therapeutics is doing and what you're working on. And so again, it's an honor to be here today. I think we should just jump right into it. I'd like to frame things up. As everybody knows, Alzheimer's is a disease that devastates millions of patients a year. It's the only disease in the top 10 causes of death without a cure. And I think I'll kick it over to Glenn. Glenn, that's the framing of this. Get us current with what's going on at Kurve and maybe address those macro issues that we're all facing.
Sure, fair enough. So the current treatments for Alzheimer's are indeed not satisfactory. We've had for years drugs that treat symptoms, and people stay on them 3, maybe 6 months, usually not much longer than that. There hadn't been a drug for Alzheimer's approved since 2004, I believe, until very recently. There were a couple of monoclonal antibodies approved that treat beta amyloid buildup. The problem is that there have been a number of these drugs going after beta amyloid. They basically haven't worked. There was one approved called Aduhelm that was approved and then failed miserably, both because the medical community didn't accept it and it just didn't work that well, and it caused a lot of brain swelling, a lot of brain bleeding. A more recent drug was approved that actually looks more favorable. It's to the point where physicians say the treatment's probably worth the risk of brain bleed and brain swelling, though both are still a risk. And the fact is that the remarks are not that remarkable, but anything that has a disease-modifying capability is considered a distinct improvement over what's been out there for the past 20 years. So the drug is being greeted with sort of a muted fanfare, actually. People are just so thrilled that there's a disease-modifying capacity with the drug, but are distinctly disappointed that the magnitude of the help isn't that great. Along comes Kurve with 5 now placebo-controlled trials in Alzheimer's, some nice statistically significant improvements in cognition, also some improvements in qualities of daily living, things you can do, can you dress yourself, and so on and so forth. And this, of course, has tremendous implications for the caregivers. On top of that, the drug does not have brain bleeding, does not precipitate brain swelling. It has a very clean safety profile. So it stands to be a significant leap forward for the treatment of Alzheimer's disease, and has some similar promise in some other neurodegenerative diseases as well.
Mark, while we're on the subject of current treatments, we've got 55 million Alzheimer's patients and families out there affected. Any other commentary you want to add about current standard of care before we get into some of the economic and costs, and then get into Kurve's solution?
Sure, and we firmly believe that the 55 million patient number is underreported. It does go a lot of times undiagnosed because the patient's families just take care of them. But there's still a lot that can be done. And the part that is not terribly well known about the disease until you actually get the diagnosis is that you've had it for a decade or more sometimes before you displayed a symptom. So unfortunately, the road that you've gone down is 10 years in the making, and now you have a symptom, and we have to go and actually try and turn the tide on that. In addition to that, it's a progressive disease, so it progressed for 10 years. Now we can see it, and that's really where the caregiver comes in, because under the current models, the patient is simply going to continue to decline at whatever rate they're going to, sometimes very quickly, sometimes a lot more slowly, but everybody is going to progress. And so the caregiver that is actually going to be taking care of the patient is going to start off with light duty, but it will eventually become quite significant, and that's where the economics really take a turn.
Yep. And so let's talk about economics. Obviously, besides this disease having devastating impact on individuals and their loved ones, there are some direct economic costs, and there's also intangible costs. And I'm just going to read a couple stats here. It's reported that the total economic impact of Alzheimer's is over $600 billion per year in the U.S. alone, with over 270 billion associated with informal caregiving. I mean, these are astronomical costs, and they don't take into account, again, the physical, emotional or mental toll that also carries a heavy burden. Mark, can you talk about these costs, both direct economic and intangible costs? We have a nice slide in front of us here.
Yeah. The intangible parts of it are, where does the burden really lie? And it lies with both the patient and the caregiver, and sometimes there's more than one. But 2/3 of the caregivers are female, so this heavily falls on the female population. It also heavily impacts the female population's ability to continue in their career, be productive, and that $270 billion in lost productivity is devastating to families that to the family that doesn't actually have the disease. So the person who's going to do the primary caregiving is going to go from full-time to part-time, from part-time to full-time caregiver. That is an unpaid role. So there's careers are affected, family incomes are affected, and this can go on for years and years, and it can actually bankrupt the family because getting just trying to get the treatment for that patient. What we want to be able to do is give people this treatment so that we not only can we slow down the progression of disease, but in some cases halt it, and in some outliers actually turn the clock back. And what this allows those patients to do is to age in place. Okay, so they don't have to have someone coming every day to fix them 3 meals, make sure that they're bathing and that their housework is being done. They can manage all that, dress themselves, feed themselves. And if we can stretch that runway out, we're actually going to have a lot more opportunities for us to be able to come up with new treatments that will affect it in the future. So anything that slows things down, which is what we're doing a really good job at here at Kurve, is going to impact these families, which is why we want the patient and the caregivers to know that there are opportunities here for all of those things to happen, where the patient doesn't need to be in a facility, it doesn't need to be in-home care. They can age in place and stay where they're comfortable. And that just gives us more and more opportunities to come up with other therapies. And that's something that Kurve is willing to do. We're going to have our own treatments for Alzheimer's. We're going to work with other companies with their treatments for Alzheimer's, so that whatever flavor of dementia is out there in a particular patient, we have an option for them. So those economics of the lost productivity and the total cost can be severely curtailed if the patients were able to lower the waterline on their condition and their progression. So we're hoping to have a real impact on that.
Thank you, Mark. Let's talk. You've mentioned family a couple times. Let's talk about family. I think it's nearly impossible for everybody has been touched in some way by this devastating disease. I know that I have family members that have been impacted, and you have a personal story that I think is important to share. Could you talk to us a little bit about how this disease has touched you personally, and maybe how that's motivated you to really get after this project?
Sure. And if you have somebody in your family that suffers from it, even if it's peripheral, then you know it's in your genetic makeup. So your first thoughts when you have a parent like I did get diagnosed with it, and we kind of knew he was going to get it, then you're thinking about what's going to happen to me when I get older. So, there's very few people who don't see this happening to someone and say, God, I hope that doesn't happen to me. So my father was the youngest of 6. And his 5 sisters were significantly older, and they all got Alzheimer's, and they all died of it. We were not in a position as a company to really help at that point. This was some years ago. But my father, because he was so much younger, fell into that window of what we could do to help. And we were lucky enough to get him into Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And he saw a very famous neurologist there, who put him on the usual round of drugs that they normally put you on, either Namenda or Aricept, something like that. And then we included our technology for him. So while his 5 sisters all just progressed and then passed on, within 9 months, he was also asymptomatic in that when he went into his doctor, he said, if you walked in here today for the very first time, I would not diagnose you as mild cognitive impaired. So it was just not just an arresting, but it actually backed him up. And what happened later on is my mother actually had a stroke, and we're treating that as well. But he was able to, with his mild cognitive impairment and the way we had able to back that off, he was able to become her caregiver after her stroke. And that lasted up until he had a heart attack. And that's really where he passed, but he did not pass of Alzheimer's, and we were able to turn the clock back on him. So we've done that with more patients than just my parent, right? So we could do that for a lot of people, and we have that ongoing in a compassionate use program. So, we are in a good position to help a lot of people. It's not just limited to my family. Everything that's out there that we do is available to everybody. So
that's amazing. What an incredible success story, and really a testament to Kurve's solution. Now, I believe you have approximately 20 nose to brain clinical trials. Can we talk a little bit about clinical trials? Maybe Glenn can weigh in on this.
Sure. So there have been a couple dozen clinical trials where we did nose to brain delivery of the drug. 10 of those are published. They're all with insulin, actually. 7 of those are multi-dose. So 3 were single-dose studies, mainly in Europe, dealing with cognitive aging, showing some favorable results, or at Harvard, again, dealing with cognitive aging in diabetics and or age-matched controls, again, showing some favorable results. But the multi-dose studies were particularly remarkable and showing a prolonged effect. Early studies were on the order of, say, 3 weeks, where clearly the patients were doing better cognitively than the patients on placebo. And to show an effect in 3 weeks in Alzheimer's is kind of remarkable. And then we had a 4-month study, again, versus placebo, with 2 different doses versus placebo. That is the most cited paper for nose-to-brain delivery of a drug that's actually treating CNS disease. It's also the most cited paper for delivering a molecule that's so large that it can't just be absorbed in the nasal mucosa. So drugs that have molecular weight of about 1,000, so say 9 amino acids or less if you're dealing with a peptide, which is sort of a small protein. 9 amino acids or less, frequently you can get absorbed into the bloodstream in the nasal mucosa, in the red lining of the nose, right? The moist lining of the nose. And maybe some of that's going to penetrate the blood-brain barrier after being absorbed into the bloodstream. So the smaller drugs, a lot of times you can get them in. Frankly, people snort cocaine, that's nose to brain delivery. What we're doing is we're getting it directly into the brain. We're not penetrating the blood-brain barrier. We are circumventing it in a remarkable way. We basically are able to get drug up to the top of the nasal cavity where the olfactory nerves are penetrating. We just go the opposite direction of those projections and get into the brain, and have had some remarkable results in Parkinson's in a pilot study, but 5 studies in Alzheimer's, and some promising results in aging diabetics and age-matched controls as well, just looking at normal cognitive aging. So this approach with insulin itself could probably benefit a majority of the patients who are over 55, who are in sort of the aging bracket where you're expected to start showing some cognitive aging. So that is a pretty remarkable set of results we've had there. We've also had some anecdotal results beyond Mark's father. We had actually Bernadine Healy, who was the first woman to run the NIH and a remarkable leader. She unfortunately ended up with a brain tumor, and her husband, who was running the Cleveland Clinic at the time, approached the company when Mark was there. This was before I even had the pleasure of working here. And they said, we'd like access to your delivery device. This head of the Cleveland Clinic had done his homework better than most people. And so Bernadine Healy started taking this drug for glioblastoma. She was forecast to live maybe 2 more months. That's what they gave her. And she lived about a year longer. So it was really felt that our ability to get drugs better into the brain, in this case, a treatment for glioblastoma, was particularly remarkable. And so one of the things we're looking at is, can we do more with brain tumors as well? We're focused principally, again, on neurodegenerative disease, particularly Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, with more data in Alzheimer's, but again, some good data in Parkinson's, where they had improvements both in motor function and in cognitive function. Our problem is not opportunity starvation. It's one of opportunity indigestion. We've got too many good things we could do just based on the clinical evidence we have. And if you go to the preclinical evidence out there, it's overwhelming in terms of the number of places we might be able to help, because what we're doing is we're reversing the metabolic decline of compromised brain cells. We're keeping the brain cells from dying, and it's pretty clear what's happening. I could go a bit more into the science, but I think we want to talk about a few more things. I'm happy to circle back and talk more about the scientific mechanism of the drug if we have time. All
right, that's great. And I think we're going to have we have some questions that are already popping up from the audience, so we can come back to this, I think, through some of the questions that I'm seeing come through here. I really want to talk about what's next. We've got this massive problem. You've got great clinical results. What's next? What are the opportunities? What are the barriers to getting Kurve to the next stage? Mark, maybe you could take that one.
Sure. We have launched a Regulation A+ public offering, and it's available to both accredited and unaccredited investors. And it's a great program for the average family to get involved in investing in companies. And what we need to do is to run one final phase 3 clinical trial, and we're trying to raise the money to do that. And we're hoping that the Regulation A+ is going to allow us to raise that money. But you can invest as little as $600 and get 100 shares of Kurve, and know that you're helping move this ball downfield. At the $5,000 level, then people are invited to join a clinical trial, and so you'll have the opportunity to get your hands on a device and participate. But there's no upper limit. There's a minimum of $580, and we just want the caregivers and the patients to know this is available, this is possible. We need to get to the end game, and this public offering is how we're seeing ourselves get there. So we would like them to go to kurvetx.com and press invest now, read over our filing circular, and see if they want to participate. We're available to take calls on it as well. So yeah, we're hoping people are going to join us.
Right. Could I ask a clarification there, Mark? You mentioned that $5,000 and they can join a clinical trial. Do you mean that they participate in the compassionate use clinical trial, or is this participating in a placebo-controlled trial?
It's either one. It's going to be at the preference of the patient and how they want to move forward with it. All right, so it can be in a placebo-controlled trial, or it could be on a compassionate use basis. But they're going to be invited to join a clinical trial. Not everyone's going to qualify.
Fair enough. Yeah, there are screening criteria. Okay, Scott, you look like you have another question.
No, I'm sure that people on the call here are wondering how they can get involved, how they can actually do it. So I know you mentioned a Regulation A+ offering. If somebody wanted to get involved, wanted to be a part of it, wanted to support what you're doing from a logistical standpoint, how do they do it?
They just go to curvetx.com and there's download the offering circular. There is invest now button. It takes 3 minutes to go through real quickly if you just know what you're already going to do. But take your time, take a look at it, read over the circular. There's a lot that we have to offer. One of the things that we want all of the shareholders to understand is that we're going to run a phase 3 for Alzheimer's, and everybody's going to benefit from the revenue. All shareholders will benefit from the revenue that we raise when we do that. But we have Parkinson's and ALS and autism and PTSD. These trials are ongoing. So whatever we bring to market, whether it's ourselves or a partner like Big Pharma or a specialty pharma or a generic pharma company wants to bring forth with our technology, everybody shares in all of it. So it's not just you're investing in Alzheimer's. That's what you're initially investing in, but you're going to see a return on that investment in all of these areas. And there are hundreds of areas of just getting drugs into the brain that we can do. So we want to cast as broad a net as possible, and that is to get Big Pharma to take a few of these, run them in parallel with what we're doing, so that we have more to offer, and we have more to offer sooner. So we're going to be talking to the pharmaceutical companies on getting involved with us, perhaps in licensing a field of use from us, and we're going to be having all of those conversations. Bigger investors want to do a Regulation D with us. We're happy to talk to them as well.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I know that you're raising money from anybody that wants to get on board, and I just think it's really cool that while you're out there speaking with institutional investors, that somebody can get on board and be a part of the solution and have a chance to invest in a company that has a lot of upside. And so that's really cool. So look, we've got thank you guys. This has been tremendous. We have some questions coming in from the audience. So I'm going to go through here rapid fire, and one of you can jump in if you both want to weigh in. That's great. The first question that comes through that I'm going to grab here is a simple one, and is, how safe is Kurve's device?
Glenn, you want to do it? You want me to do it?
It's extremely safe. When you look at the way it's been used, the main concern with insulin has been, might this precipitate hypoglycemia, which is what you're in danger of when you're injecting for diabetes. And there have been no clinically significant episodes of hypoglycemia with the device, because again, we're not getting into the systemic bloodstream, we're only getting into the brain. And in general, adding insulin to the brain, especially by the time you're over 50, which is where almost all of our patients are, is generally healthy. It's improving the metabolic function of the brain. So it's not just safe, even in a normal patient, and we've done this with normal patients over 50, there tend to be improvements. So it's very safe, no serious adverse events attributed to this device with insulin, which is what we're principally developing, nor with any other treatments with the device, to our knowledge.
All right, thank you. And we touched on this earlier, but let's elaborate. The next question is, can you only treat Alzheimer's?
Yeah, you're right. We did touch on this one, and the answer is no. I mean, as a device company, our job was to take whatever drug our partners brought to us and be able to deliver that to the brain, and we've never failed to do that. And I think we're the only technology that has a 100% track record on that, at least that we're aware of. But we have 22 clinical trials running, and 7 of those are with insulin for mild cognitive impairment. But the fun thing about it is they're using the same drug, the same device, same dose for mild cognitive impairment in Alzheimer's, in Parkinson's, in multiple sclerosis, in aging African Americans, and HIV patients. So they're all subsets of the same mild cognitive impairment umbrella, and we are being able to treat them all with the same drug, same device, same dose. In addition to that, we have polyclonal antibodies, monoclonal antibodies, proteins, peptides, solutions, suspensions, combination products, all of the things that we've been able to do. The very first time we treated glioblastoma with Bernadine Healy, as Glenn alluded to, it was a cocktail of 3 different drugs in a single dose, nose to brain. So it was much less invasive on the patient, who didn't have to stay on the device they were on at the time for 20 minutes, 3 times in succession, 4 times a day. So that was 12 dosings. With ours, they did it twice a day. and they've got the same effect. So we could do a lot besides Alzheimer's.
Right?
What's
Explain the dosing. How long is the dosing with the device, Mark? It's usually 15 to 30 seconds, right?
It's usually 15 to 30 seconds. We've had a couple where the volume that our partners wanted to deliver was so high, it went a little above that. But yeah, at the end of the day, our flagship Alzheimer's product, Intralin, is going to be less than 1 minute a day. It's 12 seconds in one nostril and 12 seconds in the other in the morning, and you do the same thing in the evening, and that's it. So you're at 48 seconds total, and the machine lasts, the cartridge lasts 2 weeks. You're just popping it on and off. It's as simple as something like this, where you just take the empty one off and put a new one on. So it's very, very user friendly and very versatile. So yeah, it's very non-invasive and easy for the patient to stay up with, because it's less than a minute a day.
That's great. Had this question come up a couple times. It's around the general area, pretty practical. How can I get my hands on a device? How can I get a device? Where do I get devices? Can you talk about that?
Sure. The compassionate use program is available to patients who want to get their hands on the device. It's enormously expensive at this stage because of how things go. But all they have to do is contact kurvetx.com, info@kurvetx.com, and just mention that you want to get involved in this, and we will reach out to you within 24 to 48 hours to give you the entire program. So that's how you can get on a device without a clinical trial. Then we're going to run a clinical trial. We're leaning toward doing a decentralized clinical trial with it, so that if you live in a place that is not near a university center or medical school or a clinic where we're going to do that, where we're going to run some, you can still get involved in the trial, even if you live in rural America. So keep in mind that if you're watching this from someplace that is not a large metropolitan area, you're still have just as much opportunity as anybody else. So just reach out to us. We want to be able to interact with as many people as possible on this, so we get as many people involved as we can. Glenn, you had something?
Yeah, a couple of things that I think will make this more attractive to patients and help with our recruitment is that we don't plan on doing any expensive neuroimaging studies like PET scanning. We've done some of those, had some nice results. Well, in general, the PET scans don't always correlate with clinical improvements, at least with the other treatments, the monoclonal antibodies for beta amyloid and so forth. And beyond that, also, we're not doing the invasive things like spinal taps that a lot of people like to do. Again, we've had some of that done in other studies, and we've shown changes in critical brain proteins. We're now focused on putting this to the finish line and getting the basic measurements that are needed to establish that this is having a real benefit in patients, not a theoretical one in terms of protein changing in the fluid that's sloshing around their brains, but rather that their brains are actually working to the point that they're maintaining cognitive function, and hopefully that they're actually moving better than they would have without the drug, that they're actually living and more independent.
Great. Next question that is on the list is, and you touched on this earlier, but let's clarify, how much can I invest in Kurve? Is there a minimum? What do I get in return?
Okay, the minimum is 100 shares. The shares are being sold right now at $5.80 a share. So it's $580 is the minimum investment. There is no theoretical ceiling. We're willing to talk to anybody about any amount. When you look at the opportunities that Kurve has to treat so many different diseases, the more money we have, the more we can get done. But what we're really looking for right now is being able to run this final clinical trial and get this thing onto the market. So you can invest as much as you want and as little as $600. And we don't want to discourage the smaller investor, because we want them to get involved. We want them to help us succeed at this. So we wanted to put the price where pretty much anybody could do it. Put it on a credit card, and at least you own a piece of the company that's going to make the changes that we can do. So we're hoping that they actually do that.
Okay, great. Touched on it earlier. Let's clarify, how long has Kurve been treating Alzheimer's? How long you guys been in the game?
Well, our first foray into it was back in 2005. And what people don't understand is when you're dealing with an academic research institution, what they end up doing is they run their trials. It takes years to get the grants and the money to do it. Then they run it. Then they have to spend a couple of years crunching the data. Then they have to go back into the grant process and try to run the next one. So it's really not that unusual for it to take a long time. But we started with a very large device just to see if it was possible, and we've been refining it ever since, so that it's down to something that is, very easy to carry around, walk around with, keep it in your pocket. You'll forget it's there. It's light. So we've come a long way since the beginning, when we just said, "Can you do this?" And we said, "We don't know. Let's go find out." Turns out we could. So we've been doing it for a while. And again, what Glenn touched on is important. We've had no adverse events to speak of in the thousands of patients that we've actually studied. So we're doing this in a much safer dose than our competition is.
Yeah, and just to be really clear, I realize this isn't an official medical presentation, but we've had no serious adverse events. Patients are always going to have some adverse reaction to some drug, whether it's sneezing, what have you. They don't like the particular flavor of the formulation, what have you. There's a mild taste component to insulin in the current formulation, but nothing that was a significant medical concern. This is one of the safest treatments I've seen in terms of a potential treatment for a CNS drug, a disorder.
That's great. All right, guys. Well, we love what you're doing. I know that we're running up on time. There are some questions that remain open. We'll follow up via email, I think is the best way to do that for any open questions. I know that if folks want to contact you, they should visit the website. If we could queue up let's queue up that slide. And guys, why don't you take us home here with your closing remarks and closing statements?
Glenn, please go.
Well, I think you've heard enough from me, frankly. I'm thrilled to be here. I think this is a significant advance in the science of treating neurodegenerative disease. I think we'll have another podcast where we drill down more on the science, which I find exciting, but I think we're good.
All right, thanks, Glenn. I will reiterate what Glenn was just saying. We've covered a lot here today. Any questions, please give us a call or write to info@kurvetx.com, and we'll be able to get back to you. We want to engage. We do have some patients that are willing to talk to new patients or shareholders. We can't toss 1,000 people over to them, but on an individual basis, they are willing to engage. So you don't have to just hear it from us. You can hear it from them, and they've been on it potentially for years now. So they'd be good people to talk to. So again, kurvetx.com, take a look, and we hope you get involved.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Mark and Glenn, pleasure getting caught up with you. And keep up the good work, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much.
Thanks, Scott.
Cheers.